The litmus test for any idea that someone espouses as to whether this idea is something that's real to them is if they can demonstrate where it shows up in their life. If you cannot demonstrate where it shows up in your life, it's an academic idea. It lives in your head. You can speak about it. You can impress people with it. You can become a professor with it. You can live in an ivory tower. However, it's not really true to you because you haven't integrated it into your life. So it's very valuable to always ask ourselves, where is this idea showing up in my life? This Shabbos is Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul. We know that the Jews wear Chai necklaces. We know that the numerical value of Chai, the letter Ches, which is 8, and the letter Yud, which is 10, is 18. The 18th day of the month of Elul, which is the month before the new year, Rosh Hashanah, is a very significant day because it gets us to reflect on what life is. And you may say, well, what life is? That's quite a simple matter. However, it's not that simple. And when we really understand what life is, we can then ask ourselves, is this idea, this understanding of what life is showing up in my life? Where is it showing up in my life? How can it show up in my life more? And if we can answer that question, we will really be alive. So if you want to be alive, we have to be able to A, define what life is, and B, be able to answer where it's showing up in my life. Because there are people, you and I know, who live entire lives in the sense of time. They can live 100 years. And yet in those 100 years, they were hardly living. They were existing. But were they living? Because there are two parts to every human being, and that is our static self, which is our body, and then there is our dynamic self, which is our soul. The soul is the energy source of everything. That's the life. And when we look at our lives and we assess our lives, we will notice, if we have some honesty, that our lives are dominated by our body. That's not a criticism to us, but that's an inherent challenge God has given us by putting the soul into the body. So it's the soul is really captive to, enslaved by the body until we make the decision to liberate it one small step at a time and become more and more alive. And this is the significance of Chai Elul, the 18th day of Elul, the day of Elul which infuses life, because it reminds us at a very critical juncture in our annual cycle, 12 days before Rosh Hashanah, it reminds us to ensure that we are infusing life into our existence. And the reason why 12 days before Rosh Hashanah is significant is because each day from the 18th day of Elul until Rosh Hashanah represents one of the 12 months of the past year. And we reflect each day on one of those months, and we begin to see how we can enhance ourselves to be people who are living more, which means connected more to our soul. That's the mission. And what's fascinating, we know there's nothing that is random in everything we experience, because everything is orchestrated by God. There's something fascinating, and that is that the 18th day of Elul is the birthday of the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement, and is also the birthday of the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi, the founder of the Chabad movement. And this is not of any coincidence whatsoever, because when it comes to our engagement in, we'll say, Judaism, there are two ways of engaging. There is a surface level engagement, we'll call that a body engagement, where we make sure that we are doing the things we are meant to do. The Torah commands us, instructs us with many mitzvahs. Are we doing those things? Right? That's the body of Judaism. What we are supposed to do, the structure, are we doing that? And they are very, very important to be done. That's why God commands us to do them. However, as important as they are still the body side of Judaism, but there is a soul side of Judaism, and that is not simply what we do as a Jew, but who we are as a Jew. And the question of who we are is a question of whether we are a person who is engaging, getting in touch with, and relating to our experiences in life from our body or from a much deeper place, which is our soul. Because when we relate with our soul, that actually brings animation and life to the mitzvos that we do, which may be left without enthusiasm and passion, because we know a body without a soul is just a physical existence which has no life. And this, in the very same way, our mystics teach us that a mitzvah, a commandment that's done, bli neshama, without soul, without spirit, is like a guf, like a body without a neshama, without a soul. So it's a mitzvah without kavana, without intention and significance and understanding, is like a guf bli neshama, is like a body without a soul. They're compared to be very much the same. And so isn't it fascinating that on the 18th day of El Chai, which is all about infusing true life, which is spirit, soul and spirit, who was brought to the world on that day? Two individuals who had an enormous impact on the world Jewry in infusing life and passion into everything that we do, because this is the entire significance and great importance of one studying Hasidic philosophy. Because Hasidic philosophy is the neshama, is the soul of Torah study, while Talmud and many other, and halacha, which are very, very fundamental and important to study, otherwise we don't even know what to do as a Jew. How they are the body, the structure, and then there's the infusing, and that comes from the Hasidic teachings, from the mystical side of Judaism, the spiritual side of Judaism. And what's really interesting as well is that the Alter Rebbe, Reb Shneir Zalman of Liadi, he never studied under the Baal Shem Tov. However, he studied under the Baal Shem Tov's successor, the Maggid of Mizrich. And the Alter Rebbe would refer to himself as a spiritual grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, because he was the student of the Baal Shem Tov's student. And actually the Talmud teaches us that whoever teaches their son, someone's son Torah, someone else's child Torah, it's as if you gave birth to him. It's as if they're your child. What does that mean? I have my child goes and studies under a rabbi, and now my son is considered to be as if he's the son of that rabbi. The answer is yes. And the reason why is because my son is my biological child, but my son is their spiritual child. Now, when we understand deeply enough the significance of Chai Elul, of the neshama, the significance of the soul and the spirit over the body, then we understand that in certain respects, my child is more deeply connected to his teacher than he is to me, because my relationship with him is biological, is physical, and his relationship with his teacher is spiritual. What is the most real aspect of a person, the physical or the spiritual? It's the spirit, it's the soul. So when we connect with someone's soul, we are most deeply connected with that person, because that is the most significant part of the person. And that's why the Baal Shem Tov, being the spiritual grandson of the Alter Rebbe, being the spiritual grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, is in certain ways makes him a more significant grandchild than the Baal Shem Tov's own grandchildren, who are biological grandchildren. Now that may sound offensive to the grandchildren, but when the grandchildren themselves have a spiritual perspective, and I believe that the Baal Shem Tov's grandchildren, such as Rabbi Baruch of Mezhebush, did, they would understand this very well. Now, it doesn't preclude a biological grandchild from being a spiritual grandchild as well. But surely we know that the Alter Rebbe was the epitome of the spiritual grandchildren of the Baal Shem Tov. So how do we know if we are people who are embracing the message of Chai Elul? We know that when we begin to show up in our lives and begin to view things and make decisions based on an awareness of a spiritual value over a material value. And it shows up most clearly when we will sacrifice a material value for the sake of a spiritual value. And then we know that we are on the road of absorbing and being an expression of Chai El.